There comes a sacred moment in every chosen soul's journey when heaven interrupts the noise of striving and whispers a command that sounds both tender and thunderous. You've done enough. Now let me take over. You've wrestled long nights that no one saw. You've carried battles that no one thanked you for. You've prayed when your faith was trembling, and you've walked through fire pretending it didn't burn. But heaven has been watching, counting every tear as a testimony, every silence as a seed, every heartbreak as holy ground. You were never forgotten. You were being forged. The Almighty does not let His chosen fall into exhaustion without purpose. The breaking was not a punishment. It was preparation. You thought you were being buried, but you were being planted. You thought it was the end, but it was the beginning of divine takeover. There's a shift in the spirit, a turning of the unseen wheel, where God steps into the places you've reached your limit. The things you tried to fix, He will now transform. The enemies you couldn't defeat, He will now expose. The doors you couldn't open, He will now command to unlock. This is not just a new season. It is a holy exchange. Your wariness for His wonder, your effort for His evidence, your chaos for His control. Heaven is not asking you to surrender in weakness, but to yield in trust. You have done what faith required. Now grace will do what strength could not. You are standing in the in-between, where your hands let go, and His hands take hold. So don't mourn what's ending. Rejoice in who's arriving. The voice that spoke to the storm, the power that raised the dead, the same Spirit that hovered over chaos in the beginning, now hovers over your life, saying, "Rest, my child. You've done enough. Now watch me do what only I can do." The hour of divine exchange. There comes a point in every divine journey where heaven demands a holy stillness, a sacred pause that separates human effort from divine intervention. You have fought long enough, prayed through sleepless nights, stood when others fell, and believed when logic said there was no reason to. You have given, endured, and poured yourself into places that seemed barren. Yet, the voice of heaven now speaks with gentle authority. You've done enough. Step aside. I will take it from here. This is not a rebuke. It is an invitation into the mystery of divine exchange, where your striving ends and His sovereignty begins. In the natural, it feels like surrender, but in the spirit, it is victory. For heaven never moves until man's strength runs dry. When you've done all you can and have no more to give, that is when heaven begins its most powerful work. The moment your hands grow tired is the moment God's hand is revealed. You were never called to finish the race in your own power. You were called to reach the edge where grace takes over. This is the threshold of divine exchange, the moment when God replaces your labor with His lordship. Think of every battle you've faced, every closed door, every unanswered prayer, every season where you questioned if God still heard you. What if the delay was divine choreography? What if the silence was not absence, but preparation? You see, heaven does not rush purpose. When you were crying for rescue, God was preparing revelation. When you were asking for relief, He was aligning redemption. What looked like stillness was a setup for supernatural motion. Every tear, every heartbreak, every disappointment was currency in the unseen realm, a price paid for a breakthrough that no human hand could manufacture. The hour of divine exchange is the moment heaven reclaims what you've been trying to carry alone. It is when God looks upon your weary spirit and says, "Now I will take over." You are not being replaced, you are being released. For too long, you fought to control outcomes, to make sense of mysteries, to hold together pieces that were never yours to fix. But now the Almighty steps in, not as a spectator, but as the finisher. The work that began in your tears will end in His glory. When heaven takes over, the natural laws bend to divine timing. The things that resisted you begin to respond. The people who ignored you start remembering your name. The opportunities that slipped away come back around, this time aligned with destiny. It's not because you suddenly became stronger. It's because you finally stopped fighting alone. The exchange is not between failure and success. It's between your effort and His excellence. When heaven says, "Stand still," it's not because nothing is happening. It's because everything is happening beyond your sight. The greatest miracles don't come from your movement, they come from your stillness. When Moses stood at the Red Sea, God didn't tell him to swim, fight, or run. He said, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." The miracle was not in Moses' hand. It was in heaven's command. The same principle is at work now. You've stretched your faith, lifted your prayers, and pushed through storms. But now God says, "Let me show you what happens when I move without your effort." This is the hour when the supernatural steps into the natural, when what you could never do in a lifetime happens in a moment. It is in this exchange that peace replaces pressure. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself or explain your journey. The same people who questioned your process will witness your promise. The same places that drained you will become stages for divine demonstration. Heaven's takeover is not quiet. It shakes the foundation of everything that opposed you. It rearranges systems, exposes deception, and lifts you into divine visibility. But before that rise, there must be release. You cannot hold on to control and expect divine completion. The moment you say, "God, I'm done," heaven replies, "Good, now I begin." That's the transaction. You trade exhaustion for elevation. You exchange striving for stillness. And in that surrender, you discover that God never needed your strength. He needed your trust. Faith was never meant to be performance. It was always meant to be partnership. You bring your obedience, He brings the outcome. You bring the seed, He brings the rain. You bring the broken pieces, He brings the masterpiece. This is the hour where the invisible becomes undeniable. The forces that worked against you now bow to the one working for you. The prayers you whispered in the dark begin to echo in the light. The season that felt like silence was heaven's workshop, crafting details you never imagined. Every delay, every detour, every disappointment was part of heaven's design to bring you to this sacred exchange, where you finally stop trying to do God's job and allow Him to do what only He can do. So, chosen one, rest your weary spirit. The author of your story is not finished, but He no longer needs your editing. What's ahead will not come by force, but by favor. You've done enough. You've prayed enough. You've endured enough. Now, heaven speaks. Stand still and see my hand. The battle that drained you will now deliver you. The ground that rejected you will now recognize you. The same storms that threatened to drown you will now carry you to your destiny. This is not the end of your effort. It is the beginning of His evidence. The exchange has begun. The throne has spoken. Heaven has taken over. The end of the labor, the beginning of the harvest, there is a divine law woven into the fabric of creation. You reap what you sow. Yet, what many forget is that the harvest does not come when you are strong, but when you are weary. The moment you feel like giving up is often the very moment heaven begins to move. The soil you've been plowing with tears, prayers, and patience was never barren. It was being prepared for divine fruit. You have labored in silence, believed without evidence, and kept faith when the heavens were quiet. But now heaven has spoken. You've done enough. The harvest is mine. The end of your labor marks the beginning of divine increase. You must understand, no tear has ever fallen unnoticed. Every sleepless night, every whispered prayer, every silent act of obedience has been recorded in eternity. The ground may have looked empty, but beneath it, life was forming. Seeds don't grow in sunlight alone. They grow in the dark, buried, unseen, and pressed by the weight of the soil. So when God kept you hidden, when it seemed like nothing was happening, it wasn't neglect. It was nurturing. The delay was divine protection. The silence was sacred strategy. When heaven says, "You've done enough," it doesn't mean your effort was in vain. It means your effort has been accepted. You've reached the end of human planning. Now heaven begins supernatural producing. The waiting was the work. The breaking was the blessing. The pain was proof that something eternal was being planted within you. You were not being punished. You were being prepared to carry a harvest that required your endurance to sustain it. Look at the field of your life. You see empty ground, but God sees growing fruit. You see unanswered prayers, but God sees roots digging deep. You see failure, but heaven sees foundation. You think you've lost time, but God says nothing was wasted. Even your tears watered your destiny. Every heartbreak refined your faith. Every delay sharpened your discernment. Every betrayal purified your focus. You were never being delayed, you were being developed. The ground had to break before the blessing could rise. And now, heaven has called for a change of season. The spiritual soil is trembling, ready to release what has been hidden beneath. The wind is shifting, the heavens are opening, and what you thought was over is only about to begin. The same fields that looked dead are about to sing with life. The same prayers that seemed unanswered are about to manifest in ways you never imagined. God has been waiting for you to stop striving so he could start multiplying. The end of the labor is not a dismissal. It's a divine promotion. You are being shifted from working for the promise to walking in it. You are being called out of the wilderness into the land of fulfillment. For years you've gathered crumbs of hope, but now heaven is preparing a table of abundance. You will soon understand why the process was so painful, because the promise was too powerful to rush. You've carried the weight of waiting, and now you'll carry the reward of endurance. The greatest harvests don't grow in comfort, they grow in surrender. God allows us to reach the edge of our strength so we can discover the depth of his power. When your prayers felt unanswered, heaven wasn't ignoring you. It was aligning everything around you. What you planted in faith is about to rise in favor. What you released in tears will return in triumph. The same ground that broke you will now bless you. Don't let your weariness deceive you. The pain was proof that the process was working. You weren't being buried, you were being built. Every no was setting up a better yes. Every delay was divine design. You've been walking through the valley, but valleys are where the soil is richest. God never wastes a wound. The place where you were once broken will soon become the place where you bloom. So, when heaven says, "Let me take over," it's not the end of your story, it's the unveiling of his glory. You have sown faithfully, now he will reap abundantly. What once felt like an endless season of waiting will become a sudden season of winning. And when it happens, it will be quick, the kind of blessing that overtakes you before you have time to understand it. Heaven's timing is never slow, it's precise. When the harvest comes, it comes fully grown, perfectly ripe, divinely aligned. And make no mistake, the harvest will not just be what you asked for, it will be more than you imagined. You planted prayers, but God will give you nations. You sowed faith, but he will return fulfillment. You endured isolation, but he will send elevation. The season of sowing was personal, but the harvest will be public. The same people who doubted your faith will witness your fruit. The same voices that mocked your struggle will marvel at your strength. This is your confirmation the waiting was not wasted. The ground that once demanded your tears will soon yield your testimony. Heaven has spoken, the labor is over. The harvest has begun. The drought is ending. The clouds are gathering. The rain is coming, not to destroy, but to deliver. And when it falls, it will fall in abundance. You won't have to chase blessings, they will chase you. You won't have to force doors open, they will swing wide because heaven has ordained it. You are standing on the threshold of fulfillment. Everything you lost will be returned in divine measure. Every sleepless night will be answered with joy unspeakable. Every heartbreak will be healed with divine compensation. You've done enough, beloved. You've tilled the soil. You've carried the cross. You've endured the dark. Now heaven says, rest. Watch me work. Because the end of your labor is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your harvest. And when the harvest comes, you will know it was never your strength that brought it. It was his promise, his power, and his perfect timing. The ground that once broke you will soon bow to you. The field you wept over will become the garden of your glory. Haven has taken over, and the harvest has begun. The silence that speaks of God's movement, there is a sacred kind of silence that only the chosen understand. A silence not of emptiness, but of divine activity. It's that space between prayer and promise, between weeping and wonder, where heaven seems quiet, and yet everything unseen is in motion. You've walked through that silence. You've questioned if God forgot your name, if your prayers vanished into the air. But now heaven reveals the truth. The silence was never absence. It was evidence that God was moving in ways you couldn't perceive. The silence was the sound of heaven working beneath the surface. When God is silent, he is not still. His stillness is strategy. His quiet is construction. Just as seeds grow in darkness, your destiny was being formed in hiddenness. You wanted signs, but he was writing substance. You wanted answers, but he was building alignment. Heaven's greatest movements often come without announcement. The Red Sea didn't roar before it parted. It looked calm, impossible, and final. The tomb didn't tremble before resurrection. It stayed sealed, cold, and silent. Yet in that silence, heaven was writing victory. The silence of God is not a void, it's a veil. Behind it, angels are being positioned, hearts are being turned, doors are being prepared. What you call delay, heaven calls design. What you perceive as rejection is often divine redirection. The silence is not God's punishment, it's his preparation. He hides what he's about to release because premature exposure can destroy what is not yet ready. The silence is your spiritual womb. What is forming in it will change your future. In the silence, your faith is purified. When God seems far, your trust is tested. You learn to believe without signs, to worship without feelings, to hope without evidence. The silence separates those who follow for blessings from those who follow for belief. It's in that quiet season that God removes false attachments. People who only walked with you when the music played, plans that only worked when doors were open. Silence strips you down to your essence, your raw trust in God alone. And it is there, in that quiet place, that heaven whispers, "You've done enough. Now let me take over." When God goes silent, it doesn't mean he stopped speaking. It means he's letting his last word work. Remember, when Jesus hung on the cross, heaven was silent for 3 days. No signs, no angels, no sound, just silence. But in that silence, hell was being defeated, sin was being conquered, and eternity was being rewritten. If heaven could move in the silence of the tomb, how much more can it move in the silence of your trial? Never mistake God's silence for his absence. It is his strategy to show that faith doesn't need noise to grow. Many of God's greatest works were done in quiet places. In a manger, in a desert, in a garden. The world demands noise, visibility, validation. But God hides his greatest moves in stillness because stillness reveals sovereignty. When everything around you is silent and motionless, that is when heaven is setting the stage for divine unveiling. You may not hear the sound of progress, but heaven is whispering, "Be still. I am not done." When you stop hearing his voice, trust his character. When you can't see his hand, believe his heart. The silence is not a denial. It's a delay that perfects. God is not ignoring your cries. He's orchestrating a response that will silence your enemies. The silence of God is a holy conversation between your soul and eternity. It's the furnace that refines, the cocoon that transforms, the dark night before the dawn. If you are in silence right now, you are closer to breakthrough than you've ever been. This is how heaven moves, quietly, strategically, unannounced. You think nothing is happening, but behind the curtain of time, everything is aligning. You think the door is shut, but heaven is crafting a new entrance. You think you've been forgotten, but your name is being mentioned in rooms you've never entered. The silence is not the end of the story. It's the sacred pause before the next chapter begins. And when heaven finally speaks, it won't come as a whisper. It will come as a wave. What took years to build in silence will manifest suddenly in glory. The job you thought you lost will lead to destiny. The people who left will make space for divine alignment. The delay that broke your heart will become the timeline that saves your soul. Everything hidden in silence will shout in manifestation. Heaven always makes up for time lost in the waiting. You must learn to rest in the rhythm of God's quiet. Stop fighting the silence. Start listening to it. There are things God can only teach you in stillness. In the noise of the world, you hear opinions. In the silence of heaven, you hear truth. Silence teaches you to depend not on outcomes, but on obedience. It removes the clutter so you can sense the movement of his hand. It trains your heart to recognize his presence even when his voice is still. So, chosen one, do not despise the quiet. Do not curse the hidden season. Heaven's silence is not a wall, it's a womb. What you call nothing is the birthplace of everything. The silence that felt so heavy is about to break open with divine sound. The same God who was silent while you were praying will now thunder when he answers. The waiting room will become the birthing room. The stillness will become the stage. Heaven has spoken. You've done enough. Now let me take over. You've cried, prayed, and pressed long enough. Now stand still and watch what I've been building in the silence. The very silence that scared you will soon become your song. Because in the kingdom of God, silence is never empty. It's always pregnant with purpose. The silence was never against you. It was working for you. And when heaven finally breaks it, everything that was hidden will bloom. Every closed door will swing wide. Every delay will reveal its design. The silence was your setup, and now the sound of breakthrough is coming. Heaven was never quiet. It was crafting. And soon, the silence that once confused you will testify God was moving all along. The separation before elevation, before heaven lifts you, it will sift you. Every chosen one must walk through a season where everything not anchored in divine purpose begins to fall away. This is not punishment, it is purification. You prayed for elevation, but you didn't realize that separation was the first step. When God prepares to promote, He begins by pruning. He removes what cannot survive in the next dimension. He takes away comfort, distractions, attachments, and even certain people, not because they were evil, but because they can't breathe the air of where you're going. Elevation demands isolation. You can't ascend while carrying the weight of what was meant to stay on the ground. In the eyes of heaven, separation is not rejection. It is redirection. The people walking away are not taking anything from you. They're making room for what's coming. The closed doors are not endings. They're divine filters, ensuring only destiny-aligned opportunities remain. God doesn't remove things to hurt you. He removes things to protect the holy that's growing within you. The higher you go, the thinner the air becomes. Not everyone can survive that altitude. That's why the closer you get to your calling, the smaller your circle becomes. You felt it. That ache of being misunderstood, the sting of losing what once felt stable, the confusion of watching once close relationships turn cold. It feels cruel, but it's sacred. Heaven is stripping away every counterfeit covering so you can stand under divine clarity. The noise that once surrounded you is being silenced so that you can finally hear the whisper of God without interference. You thought people abandoned you, but heaven was aligning you. The same ones who left were unknowingly obeying divine timing. They had to go so you could grow. Every elevation comes with a cutting. It's the law of spiritual growth. A seed cannot rise until it breaks. A butterfly cannot fly until it leaves the cocoon. Likewise, you cannot step into your divine purpose while holding on to everything that once defined your past. There are attachments that served you in one season, but will suffocate you in the next. God loves you too much to let you climb carrying unnecessary weight. So He starts removing. You call it loss. Heaven calls it lifting. It hurts when the familiar fades, when the hands you helped no longer reach back, when your name stops being celebrated by the crowd you once inspired. But understand this. Heaven never subtracts without preparing to multiply. The silence after separation is not the end. It's the clearing of space for divine addition. God doesn't prune what He doesn't plan to prosper. When He allows something to leave, it's because it has finished its assignment in your story. You can mourn what left, but don't chase it. What's gone cannot hold what God is about to pour out. Separation exposes strength. It forces you to depend not on support systems, but on the source Himself. You learn that solitude is not loneliness. It's leadership training. You discover that isolation is where revelation is born. The voices that once validated you go silent, and suddenly, all you have is God's voice. And that's when you realize it's the only one that ever mattered. Heaven isolates before it elevates, not to punish you, but to make sure that when you rise, your focus is fixed on Him alone. Every person you lose, every opportunity that collapses, every place that no longer fits, they're all signs that you're being called higher. And in that climb, not everyone who started with you can finish beside you. Some people were meant to walk with you to the gate, but not through it. Don't resent the release. Revere it. Because every separation is an announcement that your season is shifting. What's falling away is making room for what's faithful to stay. God is not just removing, He's replacing. The friends who left will be replaced with kingdom connections. The doors that shut will give way to divine openings. The platform you lost will be exchanged for influence that can't be taken. But first, He must clear the clutter. For elevation to last, the foundation must be pure. You can't carry jealousy, bitterness, or fear into the altitude of promise. So the pruning continues, not to punish, but to prepare. The pain of separation is holy. It purifies motives, clarifies purpose, and strengthens faith. It teaches you to love without attachment, to give without expectation, and to walk without needing applause. It's in this solitude that you find your true identity, the one not built on people's approval, but on heaven's anointing. When God separates you, he sanctifies you. You stop striving to fit in because you realize you were never meant to blend in. You were set apart, not sidelined. Soon you'll look back and see why the detours were divine. The people who left were never enemies. They were escorts guiding you to destiny's door. The disappointments were not denials. They were divine direction. The loss was not the end. It was the invitation to something eternal. The very things you thought you needed were the ones holding you back. Now that they're gone, you can finally breathe the air of your next dimension. Heaven always separates before it elevates. Joseph was separated from his brothers before becoming ruler. David was separated from the battlefield before becoming king. Even Christ was separated from the crowd before resurrection glory. The pattern has never changed. Isolation precedes revelation, and revelation precedes elevation. So if you feel alone, misunderstood, or stripped, rejoice. Heaven is moving. You are not being abandoned, you are being advanced. The pruning is painful, but the fruit will be powerful. The emptiness you feel now is not the absence of purpose. It's the space being cleared for divine fulfillment. Chosen one, don't cling to what's leaving. Let heaven complete the separation. You've done enough trying to hold together what God is pulling apart. Trust the process that hurts but heals, because when the pruning is done, you'll rise lighter, freer, and stronger. And when God finally lifts you, you'll understand why everything and everyone had to shift. For every separation is a prophecy of elevation. Every loss is a ladder. Every goodbye is God saying, now you're ready to go higher. What you lost in comfort, you'll gain in clarity. What you gave up in companionship, you'll gain in calling. Heaven has spoken, you've done enough. Now let me take over. And when he does, what was once taken will be returned in divine measure, because every chosen soul must be separated before it is elevated. And you, beloved, are next. The rest of the redeemed, there comes a moment in the journey of every chosen soul when heaven whispers, lay your weapons down. You've fought long enough, prayed through storms, carried burdens that weren't yours to bear, and tried to hold together pieces that God himself was trying to rearrange. You've done enough. This is not defeat. This is divine transition. It's the hour when striving gives way to surrender, when battle gives birth to blessing. Heaven now invites you into what few ever find, the rest of the redeemed. This is not the rest of the weary, but the rest of those who know their war has been won by the hands of the Almighty. You have been trained by trial. You've walked through fire and came out refined. You've endured seasons where faith was your only breath and hope your only light. But what you didn't see was that through every sleepless night, every tear, and every test, God was not just proving his faithfulness, he was proving you. Now that your endurance has been perfected, heaven declares enough. Sit down in my promise. Rest and watch me move. The rest of the redeemed is not laziness, it's divine confidence. It's the posture of knowing that what once required your effort now requires only your expectation. You're no longer chasing, you're attracting. You're no longer begging, you're believing. This rest doesn't mean you stop moving. It means you move in rhythm with grace, not in panic with fear. You no longer strive for what is already yours. You receive it. You no longer fight to be seen. Heaven already recognized you. You see, God never intended for his chosen to live in exhaustion. The rest of the redeemed is not found in inactivity, but in alignment. It is when your soul finally synchronizes with heaven's tempo. You begin to understand that the storms were never meant to drown you. They were meant to direct you. You stop asking why and start saying thank you. You stop carrying everything as if God needed your help to finish what he started. The moment you rest is the moment you make room for the miraculous. Because miracles don't happen when you're struggling. They happen when you're still. When Jesus calmed the storm, he didn't shout louder than the wind. He rested louder than the chaos. He slept in the middle of what terrified others because he knew that rest is the highest form of faith. The redeemed rest not because the battle is easy, but because they trust the outcome. You are entering a season where your stillness will speak louder than your striving. Heaven is saying, you have fought enough, believed enough, waited enough. Now rest and watch me perform my word. Rest is not escape, it's evidence. It's proof that you've reached the place where your trust outweighs your tension. You no longer measure your worth by how much you do, but by how much you depend on Him. This is the rest where anxiety breaks, fear dissolves, and peace becomes your portion. The same God who held you in the storm is now preparing to seat you in still waters. You will soon understand that rest is not passive, it's prophetic. It declares to every enemy, I am not afraid, because heaven has already taken over. In the rest of the redeemed, doors open without knocking. Opportunities arrive without chasing. Blessings find you in your stillness. You stop exhausting yourself trying to convince, prove, or fix, and start witnessing divine orchestration. The people who once overlooked you will now recognize the light of favor on your life. The things you once had to push for will begin to flow to you because you finally let God do the heavy lifting. Rest doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening in the unseen. The more you let go, the more heaven takes over. You'll start to see divine reversals. Where pain once ruled, peace will reign. Where rejection once cut, restoration will flow. The rest of the redeemed is heaven's way of saying, you've been through enough battles. Now you'll live in blessing. The fight has shifted from your hands to His throne. This rest will feel strange at first, especially for those who've been in survival mode for years. You'll be tempted to keep fighting, to keep fixing, to keep forcing. But heaven says, be still. Stop trying to prove your worth. Stop reopening wounds I've already healed. Your job now is not to perform, but to position. Not to fight for what's yours, but to rest in who you are, chosen, covered, and called. The rest of the redeemed doesn't mean the absence of challenges. It means the presence of divine control. You'll still face storms, but they'll no longer shake you. You'll still walk through valleys, but they'll no longer define you. Because once you've entered divine rest, battles stop breaking you. They start building you. You'll stop questioning God's silence and start trusting His sequence. You'll stop begging for doors to open and start realizing you are the open door through which His glory flows. Everything you endured was leading to this peace. The trials were not just tests, they were transitions. God wasn't ignoring you. He was inviting you into maturity. He let you fight until you learned to trust, and now that trust has become your rest. You've passed through fire and flood, and now heaven calls you into fulfillment. This is the rest where burdens lift, promises manifest, and every unfinished battle finds its divine conclusion. And when you finally rest, heaven begins to roar on your behalf. What you release, God replaces. What you surrender, He strengthens. When you sit in His peace, He stands in your defense. The angels move when you stop striving. The miracles manifest when you stop micromanaging. You'll soon see that rest was never inactivity. It was intercession in its highest form. So, chosen one, lay down your weapons. You have fought long enough. Let the same hands that formed you now fight for you. Let the same voice that called you now calm you. Let heaven finish what your heart can no longer carry. The rest of the redeemed is here, and it's your inheritance. This is the season where you stop chasing and start receiving, where you stop proving and start prevailing, where you stop worrying and start watching heaven work. You've done enough. The war is over. The waiting is complete. Now let peace reign. Let grace guide. Let God take over. Because when the redeemed rest, heaven moves, and the story that once broke you becomes the testimony that crowns you.